One day after my dad passed away, my mom gave me up for adoption without warning, and now, after 10 years of silence, she's reached out to me, asking for help. I am Alex, and I am 22 years old. My life was completely shattered the day after my father passed away. I was just 12 when my mother, without a single warning, gave me up for adoption. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. One day I was grieving my dad. The next I was standing in a stranger's living room, being told that this was my new family. For years I waited. Waited for her to come back. To explain. To fight for me. She never did. 10 years passed in complete silence. And then, out of nowhere, she reached out. No apology. No acknowledgement of the past. Just a simple message. I need your help. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. After everything she had done, she actually had the nerve to ask me for help. Growing up, I was always close with my dad. He was my rock, my guide through everything. My mother, on the other hand, was more of a distant figure. Not in a cruel way. She wasn't abusive or neglectful, but she wasn't exactly present, either. She had her own world, her own interests, her own life. My father, however, was the one who took care of the details. The school meetings, the bedtime stories, the good job when I made a soccer goal or aced a math test. He was always there. Then, everything changed when I was 12. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. It came out of nowhere. One minute we were planning a summer vacation, and the next we were in hospitals, doctors' offices, and endless waiting rooms. My mom's behavior shifted too. She was there, but she wasn't there. She became cold, distant, and started spending more time away. Looking back, it was almost like she was preparing for something. Preparing to lose him. Preparing to lose me. I remember the night before my dad passed. He told me he was proud of me, that I was going to be okay no matter what. I didn't know it then, but those were his last words to me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my mom's frantic voice. She was crying. The kind of sobs that rattle your bones. When I rushed into the living room, I saw her on the phone, her face pale and haunted. And then I heard the words, "Your father passed away, Alex." I froze. It was like the world stopped turning. And in that moment, everything shattered. But what came next was far worse than I could have imagined. After my father's death, the world I knew crumbled. My mom was a different person, cold, distant, like someone I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was just grief. Everyone handles loss differently, right? But soon, it became clear that something much darker was happening. The house became eerily silent, save for the quiet whispers of the wind outside. My mom's behavior grew more erratic. She stopped cooking dinner, refused to help me with my homework, and avoided talking about my dad altogether. I would catch her staring at the family photos, her face twisted in a way I couldn't understand. But whenever I asked her what was wrong, she'd brush it off with, "Nothing, Alex. I'm just tired." I tried to fill the void left by my dad. I spent hours in his study, going through old papers, trying to find some comfort in the way he organized his life. But even that didn't help. Nothing could replace the one person who made everything feel okay. One evening, things took a turn I never expected. My mom told me we needed to talk. We sat in the kitchen, where we'd had so many family meals before, laughing and joking, sharing the small moments of our day. But this was different. Her eyes were hollow. She looked exhausted, and there was something else there. Something dark. "I've made arrangements." "Alex," she said, her voice shaky. "You're going to live with a new family." I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Where's Dad? Why are you doing this?" Her eyes shifted away, avoiding mine. "It's for the best, sweetheart. I just can't take care of you right now." "Mom, you don't mean this," I begged, tears stinging my eyes. But she just nodded, her face unreadable. Within hours, I was on my way to another family. Another house. Strangers who would try to fill the role my parents had played in my life. My whole world had been turned upside down, and I had no idea why. Years passed, and life went on. I adjusted to my new family, tried to bury the memories of my past, and learn how to function without the two people who were supposed to raise me. But the questions never stopped. Why had my mother given me up? Why hadn't she fought for me? I reached out to her countless times, but each time, she'd either ignore me or respond with vague, emotionless messages. "I'm sorry, Alex. I just couldn't." That was all I ever got from her. Then, on the 10th anniversary of my father's death, I decided I had to face the past. I went through my old things, trying to find some clue, anything, that could explain why my mother had suddenly abandoned me. That's when I stumbled upon it. It was an old letter wedged deep in a box of forgotten memories. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting familiar but strange, my mother's. I unfolded it, feeling a mix of anger and hope. It was addressed to someone named Catherine, someone I had never heard of before. The letter was short, but the message was crystal clear. "I don't know what to do anymore. Alex is too much for me. I'm not ready to be a mother. I need to let him go. I'm just trying to survive, Catherine. Please understand." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman who had given me life, the woman who was supposed to love and protect me, had given up on me. She hadn't even tried to fight for me. The anger that had been building for years flared to life, and I couldn't contain it. What kind of mother abandons their child without a single word? And why'd she kept this secret for so long? I spent hours staring at that letter, the words echoing in my head. But the discovery didn't stop there. While I was searching through old family photos, trying to make sense of the past, I found something else. A picture of my mom, standing beside another woman, Catherine, the name from the letter. They were smiling, their arms around each other, looking like they were the best of friends. It clicked. Catherine wasn't just a friend. She was someone who had influenced my mother's decision. Someone who had played a part in tearing our family apart. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of my mother and Catherine. What had they been discussing? Had Catherine convinced my mother to give me up? I wasn't going to rest until I knew the full truth. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them. The more I dug into my past, the more questions I had. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter and the picture of my mom with Catherine. Everything pointed back to her. I needed to confront Catherine. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter how painful it would be. The idea of facing her, of hearing the truth from her own lips, made my stomach twist in knots. But I had no choice. I found her address through an old family directory. It felt like the longest drive of my life, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I navigated the unfamiliar streets. What would I even say to her? Was she going to deny everything? Would she throw my questions back in my face? When I pulled up to the house, my heart was pounding in my chest. The front yard was well kept, the kind of place that screamed normalcy. But the facade only made it worse. I was about to shatter whatever peace this woman had built for herself. I rang the doorbell, my breath shallow. After a moment, the door creaked open, and there she stood, Catherine. She looked the same as in the photo, but there was something different now. Her eyes flickered with recognition, followed by a flash of something else. Fear? Guilt? Alex, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. What are you doing here? I didn't waste time. You know exactly why I'm here. I need answers. You and my mom. What happened? Why did you give me up? Her face froze, and for a moment, I thought she might slam the door in my face. But instead, she stepped aside, allowing me to enter. We sat down in her living room, the silence between us heavy with years of unspoken words. Catherine seemed hesitant, as if she were carefully weighing her response. I know this is hard for you, Alex, she began, her voice unsteady. But you have to understand, it wasn't just your mom's decision. There were other factors at play. She was dealing with things she couldn't talk about. She wasn't in a place to take care of you. I shook my head, my anger rising again. She was my mother. She should have fought for me. Instead, she gave me up like I was nothing. Catherine looked away, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry. You have to believe me. We both tried. But your mother, she was struggling with so much. She thought she was doing what was best for you. She thought you'd be better off without her. Better off. I spat. She was supposed to be my mother. She abandoned me. There's no excuse for that. Catherine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, clearly torn. It wasn't that simple, Alex. Your mom didn't just give you up. There were threats, things you don't know about. Your mom was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. Her whole life had changed after your dad passed away, and she didn't know how to handle it. She thought if she gave you up, it would protect you. What kind of protection is that? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. You think abandoning your son is the solution? Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know, Alex. I don't know. But your mom was in a dark place, and I may have encouraged her to make that choice. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. My mind was reeling, but it made sense now. Catherine wasn't just an innocent bystander. She had been the one to push my mom into making the decision. She had played a role in my abandonment. I stood up suddenly, pacing the room as everything I'd known about my life crashed down around me. How could you do that? You knew what that would do to me. You knew how much I needed her, and yet you stood there and let it happen. You let her destroy me. I'm sorry, Catherine whispered. I didn't know how to stop her. She was already too far gone, and I didn't know how to help her. I thought I was doing the right thing. I stopped pacing, standing still for a moment, trying to collect myself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years, I had lived with the pain of being abandoned, with no understanding of why it had happened. And now, I was finally learning the truth, but it felt like my entire life had been built on a lie. Where is she now? I asked, my voice quieter. Catherine hesitated before speaking again. She's been asking about you, Alex. She's reached out, tried to contact you a few times over the years. But every time she did, you didn't respond. She thought you hated her. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, maybe she's right. How am I supposed to forgive her for what she did? She gave me up, Catherine. She left me. Catherine stood up, walking over to me, her face filled with regret. She never wanted to leave you, but she thought it was the only way to protect you. She thought if she let you go, she could make things better. And now she wants to make things right. The words hit me harder than anything else. The woman who had abandoned me all those years ago, who had left me to figure things out on my own, wanted me to forgive her, and she was asking for my help. I stood there, frozen in place, as the weight of it all settled on my shoulders. Everything had changed, but I didn't know what to do with this new truth. I left Catherine's house that day feeling like I'd just walked through the wreckage of my entire life. The pieces of the past, the truth about my mother, all of it was out in the open now, but I didn't feel any better. I felt worse. What was I supposed to do with this new information? My whole life had been shaped by the absence of my mother. She had abandoned me, and I'd carried that pain for so long. I had built an entire identity around it. And now she was asking for forgiveness. She wanted to make things right. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to blame her for everything. The years of loneliness, the confusion, the feeling of never being good enough. But at the same time, part of me wanted to understand. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe just maybe, she hadn't wanted to abandon me. Maybe she had been forced into a corner, just like she said. But the doubts lingered. Could I believe her? Was I even capable of forgiving her after everything I had been through? Was this truly my mother, or just a stranger trying to rewrite history? I tried to put it all out of my mind for a while. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I threw myself into work, avoided calls from family, and spent most of my time trying to distract myself from the gnawing feeling that something unresolved was eating away at me. But the truth never fully left my thoughts. I had already spent too many years pretending that my mother's abandonment didn't affect me, convincing myself I was fine. But now it was clear that it was impossible to keep running from it. The wound had festered for so long. It wasn't something I could just ignore. The night my mother reached out again, I sat on my couch staring at the message for over an hour. Her words were simple, but they hit me like a ton of bricks. Alex, I know you may never forgive me, and I understand that. But I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Please, let me explain. Please, let me try to make things right. My finger hovered over the screen, shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to respond with anger, to tear into her the way I had imagined doing so many times in the past. But another part of me, a part that I didn't even recognize, wanted to hear her out. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story. Maybe I was missing something. I was torn. This wasn't just about forgiving her anymore. This was about the truth. The truth that had been buried under years of resentment and unanswered questions. And I was finally ready to hear it. So I did it. I picked up the phone and called her. It rang twice before she picked up, and I could hear her shaky breath on the other end. She wasn't expecting this. Alex, she said softly, her voice cracked with emotion. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make up for what I did, but I want to try. I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. And I've regretted it every single day since. My heart pounded in my chest. The sincerity in her voice was overwhelming, and I felt the flood of emotions that I had been holding back for years rushing to the surface. Anger, confusion, but also something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of longing. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom, I said, my voice cracking. You left me. You let me go, and I've spent years wondering why. You didn't just abandon me physically. You abandoned me emotionally, too. I was a kid, and you just vanished. She let out a slow breath, as if gathering her thoughts. I know, Alex. I know, and I hate myself for that. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it was what was best for you, but I was wrong. I was terrified. Terrified of failing you, of not being the mother you needed. And I let others convince me that it was the only way. Her voice quivered, and for the first time, I heard vulnerability in a way I never had before. I wanted to lash out. I wanted to shout at her for all the pain she had caused, for making me feel like I wasn't worth her time, for leaving me with a hole in my heart. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Who else was involved in this, Mom? Was it Catherine? Yes. She interrupted softly, almost apologetically. Catherine was the one who suggested it. She thought it would be better for you, for everyone, if you had a chance at a new life, away from the mess we were in. I didn't want to do it, Alex. But I listened to her, and I've regretted it every day. The words hit me hard. Catherine, my mother's closest confidant, had pushed her into making that decision. She had played a role in tearing apart our family, in breaking my heart. The woman I had once trusted, the woman I had considered my second mother, had been the architect of my suffering. I don't know what to say, Mom, I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had just learned. I spent so many years wondering why you left. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't enough. No, she said firmly. You were always enough, Alex. It was me who wasn't enough. I wasn't strong enough to fight for you. And I'm so sorry. Tears filled my eyes. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel the grief that had been buried deep inside. The grief I had convinced myself I didn't need to acknowledge. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I'd always blamed her, and now, for the first time, I saw the human side of her. The woman who had been lost, just like me. The woman who had made a mistake, a devastating mistake, but had never stopped loving me. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, Mom, I said through the tears. But I need time. I need to process this. It's just so much, so fast. I understand, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Take all the time you need. I'll be here whenever you're ready. I didn't know what the future held for us, or if I could ever forgive her for everything that had happened. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in the past. The truth had come to light, and now I had to decide what to do with it. The healing wouldn't come all at once, but maybe, just maybe, it would come eventually. I'll think about it, I said quietly before ending the call. I sat there in the silence of my apartment for what felt like an eternity. The past had come crashing down on me, and now I had to figure out what to do with it. Could I rebuild a relationship with my mother? Could I forgive her, or was it too late? Could she ever make up for the years she had taken from me? I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time, I felt like I had some hope. Hope that, maybe, the future wouldn't be so bleak after all. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow across the horizon. It felt like a new beginning, even if it was one I wasn't fully ready to embrace just yet. I didn't have all the answers, but I was taking that first step. And maybe that was enough for now. If you found this story relatable or shocking, please give this video a like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story.